The spring of 1847 arrived in London, with all the pomp and splendour befitting the height of the season. Mayfair glittered with carriages and chandeliers, drawing rooms buzzed with gossip and intrigue, and ballrooms overflowed with eligible young ladies draped in silk and hope. Among them all, one name rose above the rest like cream to the top of fresh milk: Miss Nellie Fenring. At 23, Nellie was neither a fresh-faced debutante nor a desperate wallflower approaching spinsterhood. She occupied that golden middle ground, a woman of sufficient maturity to be deemed sensible, yet young enough to be considered a prize. Her father, George Fenring, the Marquis of Fenring, was a man of considerable influence in the House of Lords, respected for his pragmatism and integrity. Her mother had passed when Nellie was but 14, leaving her to be raised by governesses and her father's occasionally overbearing guidance. The result was a woman of impeccable breeding and flawless deportment. Nellie's beauty was of the serene, classical variety: honey-blonde hair dressed in elegant coils, grey-blue eyes that seemed perpetually calm, and features that suggested both intelligence and restraint. She spoke French and Italian fluently, played the pianoforte with competence if not passion, and could discuss literature, politics and estate management with equal ease. She was, in short, exactly what a nobleman's wife should be, and she was spoken for. Lord Edmund Hartley, heir to the Earl of Ashton, had courted her with quiet determination for the better part of 2 years. Edmund was everything one could wish for in a prospective husband: handsome in a pleasant, unremarkable way, possessed of a generous estate in Hampshire, kind-hearted and utterly respectable. There had never been a whiff of scandal attached to his name. He attended church regularly, treated his tenants fairly, and was known to be devoted to his widowed mother. When Edmund had formally requested Nellie's hand the previous autumn, her father had accepted with enthusiasm. The betrothal was announced in December, and the wedding was set for July, after the season naturally, so that Nellie might enjoy one final spring as an unmarried woman. "How you are fortunate, my dear," her father had told her the night of the announcement, his grey whiskers bristling with satisfaction. "Lord Edmund is a good man. You shall be a countess one day, with an excellent household and a husband who will treat you well. What more could a sensible woman desire?" Nellie had smiled and agreed, because that was what sensible women did. And truly, what more could she desire? Edmund was kind. He would never mistreat her. They would have children, manage estates, host dinners, and grow old together in comfortable companionship. It was a good life, a predictable, secure, entirely reasonable life. Yet sometimes, late at night, when the house was silent and the London fog pressed against her window, Nellie lay awake and wondered why her heart felt so peculiarly empty. "You're being foolish," she would whisper to herself in the darkness. "This is what every woman wants. You should be grateful." And she was grateful. She was. It was the second week of April when Edmund arrived at the Fenring townhouse in Berkeley Square with an unusual request. Nellie was in the morning room with her companion, Miss Hazel Wimsey, reviewing invitations for the week's engagements. Hazel was a distant cousin, the orphaned daughter of Nellie's mother's second cousin, who had come to live with the Fenrings when Nellie was 19. At 28, Hazel was sharp-eyed, practical, and fiercely protective of her charge. She had warm brown hair always neatly pinned, a smattering of freckles across her nose, and an ability to read people that bordered on uncanny. "Lady Pemberton's musical on Thursday," Hazel was saying, her finger tracing down the gilt-edged invitation. "That shall be dreadfully dull, but your father will expect you to attend. And the Duchess of Thornbury's ball on Saturday, which, oh, that's Lord Edmund." Indeed, the butler was showing Edmund into the morning room. He looked particularly well turned out in a deep blue coat and fawn trousers, his light brown hair carefully brushed, his smile warm and genuine. "Miss Fenring," he said, bowing. "Miss Wimsey, good morning." "Lord Edmund," Nellie replied, setting down her teacup and rising to greet him properly. "This is an unexpected pleasure." "I hope I'm not intruding," Edmund said, his grey eyes bright with something like excitement. "I've come with rather excellent news, actually. My closest friend has just returned to London after 3 years abroad, and I'm eager for you to meet him." "A friend?" Nellie asked politely. "My dearest friend in the world," Edmund said warmly. "We were at Eton together, then Oxford. He's been travelling on the continent, Vienna, Rome, Paris, but he's come home at last. I've spoken of him often, I think. Vincent Montague, the Duke of Ravenmore." Hazel's head snapped up, and even Nellie felt a small flutter of recognition. Everyone in London society knew of the Duke of Ravenmore, though he was something of an enigma. He had inherited his title at the age of 24, nearly 5 years ago, upon his father's sudden death. Since then, he had been abroad more often than not, managing extensive properties and business interests on the continent. Rumour painted him as wealthy beyond imagining, devastatingly attractive and utterly uninterested in marriage. "I should very much like to meet him," Nellie said carefully. "Though I confess I'm surprised he is not married. Surely the matchmaking mamas have been relentless." Edmund laughed. "Oh, they have been. But Vincent is particular. He's always said he'd only marry when he found a woman of exceptional quality, someone with wit and character, not just beauty and breeding. I've told him all about you, of course, and he's most eager to meet the woman who has captured my heart." Something in Edmund's tone, proud, affectionate, entirely innocent, made Nellie's chest tighten with an emotion she couldn't quite name. Guilt, perhaps, though she had nothing to feel guilty about. "When shall this meeting occur?" she asked. "Tonight, if you're amenable," Edmund said. "There's a reception at Lord Ashford's house in Grosvenor Square. Vincent will be there, and I thought, well, I should like my two favourite people in the world to know one another." "Of course," Nellie agreed, smiling. "I shall look forward to it." After Edmund departed, pressing a chaste kiss to Nellie's gloved hand, Hazel fixed her with a long, searching look. "What is it?" Nellie asked. "Nothing," Hazel said slowly. "Only the Duke of Ravenmore. They say he's quite formidable." "All dukes are formidable, Hazel. It comes with the title." "No," Hazel said thoughtfully. "I mean formidable in a different way. I've heard he's brilliant, absolutely ruthless in business, but with a strange sort of honor about him. And they say women find him, well, difficult to resist." "How fortunate, then, that I am already spoken for," Nellie said lightly, though something in her stomach twisted strangely. "Yes," Hazel murmured, "how fortunate." Lord Ashford's reception was everything a London social event should be. Crowded, glittering, and slightly too warm. Nellie arrived with her father and Hazel, her gown a masterpiece of ivory silk, with delicate pearl embroidery at the bodice. Her hair was dressed simply but elegantly, and she wore her mother's pearl necklace, her only truly precious jewellery. Edmund found them almost immediately, his face alight with pleasure. "Miss Fenring, you look exquisite. Come, Vincent is just over here. I've been keeping him from the predatory mamas all evening." He guided her through the crush of guests toward a quieter corner near the tall windows overlooking the garden. And there, standing with a glass of wine in hand, was a man who seemed to command the very air around him. Vincent Montague, the Duke of Ravenmore, was not handsome in the conventional sense. His features were too strong, too severe for mere prettiness. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with black hair that fell just slightly longer than was fashionable, as though he couldn't be bothered with the latest styles. His face was all hard angles, a sharp jaw, high cheekbones, a nose that had clearly been broken at least once. But it was his eyes that arrested her, deep penetrating black framed by dark brows and burning with an intelligence so fierce it was almost unsettling. He wore his evening clothes with a careless elegance that suggested both wealth and complete indifference to others' opinions. Everything about him radiated power, not the inherited, effortless power of most aristocrats, but something earned, fought for, undeniable. When his gaze met hers, Nellie felt the world tilt. It was not attraction, not merely attraction, it was recognition. As though some part of her soul had been waiting her entire life for this exact moment, and now that it had arrived, everything else fell away into insignificance. "Vincent," Edmund was saying, his voice seeming to come from very far away, "may I present my betrothed, Miss Nellie Fenring? Nellie, this is His Grace the Duke of Ravenmore, my dearest friend and the finest man I know." Vincent bowed, the movement precise and controlled. When he straightened, his eyes never left hers. "Miss Fenring," he said, and his voice was everything she should have expected and nothing she was prepared for. Deep, cultured, with a slight roughness beneath the polish that sent heat racing down her spine. "Edmund has spoken of little else but you for months. I confess I'm delighted to finally make your acquaintance." There was something in the way he said "delighted" that suggested the word was wholly inadequate. "Your Grace," Nellie managed, her voice steadier than she felt. Lord Edmund has likewise spoken warmly of you. I understand you have been travelling abroad. I have, Vincent said, though I find myself wondering now what took me so long to return home. The words were perfectly polite, appropriate for any social conversation. But the way he looked at her, steady, searching, as though he could see straight through all her careful composure, made them feel like something else entirely. Edmund, bless him, noticed nothing amiss. He beamed at them both, delighted. I knew you would get on splendidly. Vincent, you must tell Nellie about Vienna. She adores music and would be fascinated by your account of the opera there. I should be honored, Vincent said quietly, still looking at her. And Nellie, who prided herself on her unshakable composure, felt her cheeks grow warm under that gaze. Perhaps, she said carefully, your grace might favor us with such stories another time. I confess, I find myself quite overwhelmed by the heat of the room just now. It was not entirely a lie. She felt feverish, as though her skin had suddenly become too tight. Of course, Vincent said immediately. Shall I fetch you some refreshment? The terrace doors are just there. You might find the air more agreeable outside. That would be most kind, Nellie said. As Vincent moved away toward the refreshment table, Edmund leaned close to Nellie, his expression concerned. Are you quite well? You do look rather flushed. I'm perfectly well, Nellie assured him, forcing a smile. Only warm, as I said. But beside her, Hazel's eyes were knowing and worried, and Nellie knew with absolute certainty that her companion had seen everything. The sudden heat in her cheeks, the tremor in her hands, the way her breath had caught when the Duke's eyes met hers. When Vincent returned with a glass of cool champagne, his fingers brushed hers as he handed it to her, just the slightest contact through their gloves, and Nellie felt it like a brand. This was dangerous. This was impossible. This was wrong. And yet, as she stood there between her kind, oblivious betrothed and the dark-eyed Duke who looked at her as though she were the only woman in the world, Nellie felt something she had never experienced in all her carefully ordered life. She felt awake. The days that followed Lord Ashford's reception passed in a strange, feverish blur. Nellie told herself that what she had felt upon meeting the Duke of Ravenmore was merely surprise, the natural response to encountering a man of such striking presence. Nothing more. Certainly nothing that should concern her, but her body betrayed her lies. At Lady Pemberton's musicale 3 days later, Vincent appeared just as the quartet began Haydn's String Quartet in C major. Nellie saw him enter from her seat in the third row, saw the way every unmarried woman in the room tracked his movements with predatory interest. He was dressed in severe black evening clothes that made him look even more imposing, his dark hair brushed back from his forehead, his expression unreadable. Their eyes met across the crowded music room, and Nellie felt her pulse leap so violently she feared those sitting near her might hear it. Vincent made his way through the room with quiet authority, declining several attempts by ambitious mummers to capture his attention until he reached the seat Edmund had saved for him, directly beside Nellie. "Miss Fenring," he said quietly, settling into the chair with fluid grace, "I hope I have not disturbed you." "Not at all, Your Grace," she replied, proud of how steady her voice sounded. "Do you enjoy chamber music?" "I find it depends entirely on the company," Vincent said, and though he faced forward as the music began, Nellie felt the weight of his awareness like a physical touch. Throughout the performance, she sat rigid as a statue, every nerve in her body screaming with consciousness of his proximity. His sleeve was mere inches from hers. If she moved her hand even slightly on the armrest, she would touch him. The subtle scent of his cologne, something dark and woody like cedar and smoke, seemed to fill her lungs with every breath. When the quartet finished and polite applause filled the room, Vincent leaned toward her, just slightly, just enough that no one else would notice. "You did not hear a single note of that, did you?" he murmured, his voice pitched for her ears alone. Nellie's breath caught. That is an extremely presumptuous—" "Forgive me," Vincent said, straightening. But there was something in his eyes, a knowing, a heat, that suggested he was not sorry at all. Across the aisle, Hazel watched them with open concern. The pattern repeated itself with horrifying regularity over the following weeks. Wherever Nellie went, Vincent seemed to appear. At first she thought it coincidence. London society was not so large that one could avoid people indefinitely. But gradually she came to understand that his presence was deliberate. He was everywhere Edmund was, and Edmund, dear, trusting Edmund, was delighted to include his closest friend in all their engagements. "Vincent has been alone too long," Edmund confided to Nellie one afternoon as they drove through Hyde Park in his curricle. "I think seeing our happiness reminds him of what he's missing. Perhaps it will finally inspire him to seek a wife of his own." Nellie murmured something non-committal, her stomach twisting with guilt and something darker, something that felt dangerously like jealousy at the thought of Vincent courting another woman. The torture of it all was exquisite. Every social engagement became a minefield. At the opera, Vincent sat in the box adjacent to theirs, and Nellie could feel his gaze on her throughout the performance, not on the stage, but on her. At garden parties, she would turn and find him watching her from across the lawn, his expression unreadable, but his eyes burning. At dinner parties, he sat too far away to speak to her directly, but she felt his presence like a storm gathering on the horizon. And the worst part, the truly damning part, was that Nellie looked for him everywhere. She entered every ballroom searching for that dark head above the crowd. Her heart leapt every time a door opened, hoping it might be him. She found herself manufacturing excuses to stand near wherever he stood, drawn to him like iron filings to a lodestone. She was losing her mind. "You must stop this," Hazel told her one night as she helped Nellie prepare for bed. They were in Nellie's chamber at Berkeley Square, the candles burning low, and Hazel's expression was more serious than Nellie had ever seen it. "Stop what?" Nellie asked, though she knew perfectly well. "Looking at him the way you do," Hazel said quietly. "Miss Nellie, I understand, truly I do. The Duke he is compelling. But you are engaged to Lord Edmund, a good man who loves you and trusts you." "I have done nothing wrong," Nellie said, but her voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. "Not yet," Hazel agreed, "but I see how you look at each other. I see how you both try not to look at each other, which is somehow worse. This cannot continue." "I know," Nellie whispered, pressing her hands to her face. "Heavens, Hazel, I know. But I cannot make it stop." Hazel was silent for a long moment. Then she said very gently, "Do you love Lord Edmund?" The question hung in the air like smoke. "I respect him," Nellie said finally. "I am fond of him. He will be a good husband." "That is not what I asked." Nellie's throat tightened. "I thought I could learn to love him after we wed. Is that not how most marriages work? Affection growing from partnership and time?" "Perhaps," Hazel said. "But if you have already met someone who makes you feel—" "Do not say it," Nellie cut her off sharply. "Please, Hazel, do not say it aloud. Because if Hazel said it, if Nellie had to acknowledge what she felt for Vincent Montague, then it would become real, undeniable. And Nellie could not afford for it to be real. She was the Marquis of Fenring's daughter. She was betrothed to Lord Edmund Hartley. She was a lady of impeccable reputation, and she could not be the sort of woman who fell desperately in love with a man who was not her betrothed, even if that man looked at her as though she were air and water and he was drowning. Vincent, meanwhile, was slowly going mad. He had known something was wrong from the moment Edmund had first mentioned his betrothed. His friend had spoken of Miss Nellie Fenring with such obvious affection, such pleased satisfaction at having secured an excellent match, that Vincent had felt nothing but happiness for him. "She's everything a man could want," Edmund had said over brandy at White's the week before Vincent returned to London. "Clever, beautiful, well-bred, and she's kind, Vincent. Genuinely kind, not merely performing kindness for society's benefit. I count myself the most fortunate of men." And Vincent had raised his glass in a toast, genuinely pleased that his dearest friend had found happiness. Then he had met her, and in one catastrophic moment, every carefully constructed wall Vincent had built around his heart had crumbled to dust. It was not rational. It was not even explicable. But from the instant Nellie Fenring's grey-blue eyes met his across Lord Ashford's drawing room, Vincent had known, with absolute, terrifying certainty, that she was his. Not in the sense of possession, in the sense of belonging, as though God or fate or whatever force governed the universe had looked down and said, "Here, this one. This is the woman your soul was made to recognize." And she belonged to Edmund. Vincent had spent 3 years abroad, building his fortune, managing estates, navigating continental politics. He had faced down foreign princes and hostile bankers. He had ridden through war-torn regions and survived a near-fatal bout of fever in Rome. He was not a man easily shaken, but Nellie Fenring unmade him. She haunted him. At night he lay awake, his body burning with the memory of standing near her, the subtle rose scent of her skin, the graceful curve of her neck, the intelligent light in her eyes. He dreamed of her constantly, dreams where she turned to him instead of Edmund, where her lips parted beneath his, where he could touch her without restraint or shame. He woke from those dreams with his heart racing and his body rigid with frustrated desire, hating himself. She was Edmund's betrothed, Edmund, who had been closer than a brother to Vincent since they were boys. Edmund, who had stood by Vincent when his father died, and the weight of the dukedom had nearly crushed him. Edmund, who trusted Vincent absolutely. To want Nellie was a betrayal. To pursue her would be unforgivable. And yet Vincent could not stay away. He told himself he was attending these social events to support his friend, to celebrate Edmund's happiness. But that was a lie. He went because he needed to see her, the way a man dying of thirst needs water. Even if he could not touch her, could not speak to her freely, just being in the same room sustained something essential in him. "You seem distracted, old friend," Edmund remarked one afternoon as they rode through Rotten Row. "Is something troubling you?" "Yes," Vincent thought. "Everything. I am in love with your betrothed and it is destroying me." "Only business matters," he said aloud. "Nothing of consequence." Edmund nodded, satisfied. "You've been too long abroad, Vincent. You need to settle down, find a good woman. Might I suggest looking among Nellie's circle? She has many accomplished friends who would make excellent duchesses." Vincent's hands tightened on the reins until his knuckles went white. "Perhaps," he said tightly. But he knew there would be no one else. There could be no one else. His heart had recognized its mate, and it was tragically, impossibly loyal. That night, at yet another ball, the Duchess of Thornbury's annual affair, Vincent stood on the edge of the ballroom and watched Edmund lead Nellie onto the floor for a waltz. They made a handsome couple. Edmund was all golden warmth and open affection, gazing down at his betrothed with obvious pride. And Nellie was perfect. Her ivory gown swirled around her like clouds, her posture flawless, her smile polite and serene. But Vincent knew, he could see, that the smile did not reach her eyes. As Edmund guided her through the turns, Nellie's gaze swept the ballroom, and when it found Vincent standing in the shadows, she stumbled, just slightly, just enough that Edmund tightened his hold, concerned. "Are you well?" Edmund asked, loud enough that Vincent could hear. "Perfectly well," Nellie assured him. "I merely lost my footing for a moment." But her eyes were still on Vincent, and in them he saw the same desperate torment that was surely reflected in his own. This could not continue. One of them would break, and when they did, the consequences would be catastrophic. The breaking point came 2 weeks later, during a house party at the Hartley estate in Hampshire. Edmund's mother, the Dowager Countess of Ashton, had decided to host an informal gathering to celebrate the upcoming nuptials. 20 guests were invited, mostly family and close friends, for 4 days of riding, cards, and pleasant company. Vincent had tried to decline, inventing urgent business in London, but Edmund had been so disappointed, so earnest in his plea, that Vincent attend. That refusal became impossible. "You're my dearest friend," Edmund had said. "I need you there. Please, Vincent." And so Vincent had gone, knowing it was a mistake, unable to resist the pull of being near her. The Hartley estate was lovely, a sprawling Elizabethan manor surrounded by ancient oaks and rolling green hills. Nellie arrived with her father and Hazel, and the sight of her descending from the carriage in a pale green travelling dress made Vincent's chest physically ache. The first 2 days passed in a haze of polite torture. Dinner each evening, with Vincent seated too far from Nellie to do more than exchange meaningless pleasantries. Cards in the drawing room afterward, where he could watch the candlelight play across her face but could not touch her. Walks in the garden where propriety demanded they remain in groups, never alone. Edmund, oblivious to the tension crackling between his betrothed and his best friend, was the very picture of a happy bridegroom. He held Nellie's hand as they strolled through the rose garden. He brought her tea just as she liked it. He spoke of their future with such genuine optimism that Vincent wanted to both weep and rage. "I know arranged marriages are common," Edmund confided to Vincent on the third afternoon as they stood on the terrace overlooking the grounds. And I'll admit, our betrothal was initially driven by practicality, our family's expectations, the joining of estates, but I truly believe Nellie and I shall be happy together. I may not be passionately in love with her yet, but I'm very fond of her, and I think love will come. After the wedding, when we truly know each other. Don't you think? Vincent's throat was so tight he could barely speak. I am certain Miss Fenring will make you an excellent wife. It was the truth, and it tasted like ashes. That night, unable to sleep, Vincent rose and descended to the Manor's library. It was past midnight, the house silent, and he desperately needed some distraction from the torment of knowing Nellie slept just 2 floors above him. The library was dark, save for the moonlight streaming through the tall windows. Vincent did not bother lighting a candle. He moved through the shadows to the shelves, searching blindly for anything to occupy his mind. He did not hear her enter. "Your Grace." Vincent spun, his heart lurching. Nellie stood in the doorway, wrapped in a dressing gown of pale blue silk, her blonde hair loose around her shoulders. In the moonlight, she looked ethereal, like something from a dream. "Miss Fenring," he said hoarsely, "you should not be here." "I know," she whispered. "I could not sleep." They stared at each other across the darkness, and Vincent felt the last threads of his control begin to fray. "You must go," he said, his voice rough. "Please, for both our sakes." But Nellie did not move. Instead, she stepped into the library and closed the door behind her. "I have tried," she said, and her voice was shaking. "I have tried so hard to do what is right, to be what I should be. But I cannot. Vincent, I cannot stop." She broke off, pressing her hand to her mouth, her eyes bright with unshed tears. And Vincent, who had held himself together through sheer force of will for weeks, finally shattered. "Neither can I," he said roughly, crossing the space between them in 3 strides. He stopped just before her, his hands clenched at his sides to keep from touching her. "From the moment I met you, I have thought of nothing else. You are in my mind every waking hour. You haunt my dreams. I cannot eat, I cannot sleep, I cannot breathe without wanting you. Vincent, I know it is wrong," he continued, the words pouring out of him like blood from a wound. "I know I am betraying Edmund. I know this is the very definition of dishonor. But I love you, Nellie. I love you with everything I am, and it is destroying me." Nellie made a sound that was half sob, half something else entirely. "I love you too," she whispered. "Heaven help me. I love you so much. I think I shall die from it." The confession hung between them, terrible and beautiful. "We cannot," Vincent said, though every fiber of his being screamed otherwise. "Edmund." "I know," Nellie said brokenly. "I know. But just for this moment, just for now, can we stop pretending?" And before Vincent could think, before he could remember all the reasons this was impossible, Nellie stepped forward and kissed him. It was not a gentle kiss. It was desperate, hungry, the kiss of 2 people who had denied themselves too long. Vincent's hands came up to frame her face, his fingers threading through her hair, and Nellie gasped against his mouth, her hands clutching at his shirt. They kissed like drowning people breaking the surface, frantic, graceless, perfect. Vincent tasted salt on her lips and realized she was crying. His own eyes burned as he pulled her closer, pouring every ounce of forbidden love into the kiss. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "What do we do?" Nellie whispered. "I do not know," Vincent admitted. "But I cannot, Nellie, I cannot watch you marry him. I cannot stand there and pretend to be happy while you pledge yourself to another man." "Then what?" she asked desperately. "What choice do we have? I am betrothed. The wedding is in 2 months. My father, Edmund's family. There are contracts, expectations. If I were to break it off, the scandal would be—" "I know," Vincent said, "I know." But as he held her there in the moonlit library, with her tears dampening his shirt and her heart beating against his, Vincent made a decision. He would not lose her, not to duty, not to honor, not to anything. Somehow he would find a way, even if it cost him everything. The morning after the library, Nellie woke with her heart in turmoil and her mind racing. She had kissed Vincent Montague. More than kissed him. She had confessed her love, had allowed herself to be held by him, had tasted the forbidden fruit of what they could be together. And now, in the cold light of day, she had to face the consequences. Hazel appeared at her bedside with morning chocolate, her expression carefully neutral. "Lord Edmund sent word that he wishes to take you riding this morning, if you are amenable," Hazel said quietly. "The weather is fine." Nellie's stomach clenched with guilt so intense she felt physically ill. "Of course," she managed. "Tell him I shall be ready within the hour." Hazel set down the tray and sat on the edge of the bed. "Miss Nellie," she said gently. "What happened?" "Nothing," Nellie lied, not meeting her companion's eyes. "You are many things, but you have never been a proficient liar," Hazel said. "You did not return to your chamber until well past 2 o'clock. I heard you." Nellie's hands trembled as she reached for the chocolate cup. "I could not sleep. I walked." "Did you walk into the Duke's arms?" Hazel asked bluntly. The cup rattled against the saucer. Nellie set it down before she dropped it entirely. "Hazel, I am not judging you," Hazel said, and her voice was surprisingly gentle. "But I am frightened for you. Whatever this is between you and His Grace, it cannot end well. You know that, do you not?" "I know," Nellie whispered. "But Hazel, what am I to do? I love him. I love him so much it feels as though my heart is being torn from my chest. And I cannot have him. It is impossible." "Is it?" Hazel asked quietly. "Betrothals have been broken before." "Not without scandal," Nellie said. "Not without destroying reputations and families. My father would be humiliated. Edmund would be— Heavens, Hazel. Edmund has done nothing wrong. He has been nothing but kind and honorable. How could I repay him by breaking his heart?" Hazel was silent for a moment. Then she said, "Would it be kinder to marry him while in love with another man?" The question struck Nellie like a physical blow. "I do not know," she admitted. "I do not know what is right anymore." The ride with Edmund was torment. He was in excellent spirits, pointing out features of the estate, discussing improvements he hoped to make after their marriage. He spoke of children, how many bedchambers they would need to convert into nurseries, what sort of governess they might hire. He was building a future in his mind, brick by careful brick, and Nellie was the cornerstone of it all. And all she could think about was Vincent's mouth on hers, the way he had held her, as though she were precious and essential. The raw honesty in his voice when he had said, "I love you." "Nellie?" Edmund's voice broke through her thoughts. "You seem rather distracted. Are you quite well?" They had stopped their horses on a small rise overlooking a stream. The morning sun was warm on Nellie's face, and Edmund was watching her with genuine concern. "Forgive me," she said quickly. "I am merely overwhelmed, I think, with all the wedding preparations." Edmund's expression softened. "I understand. Mother can be rather zealous in her planning. If it becomes too much, you must tell me, and I shall rein her in." "You are very kind," Nellie said, and meant it. Edmund reached over and covered her gloved hand with his. "I want you to be happy, Nellie. That is all that matters to me. I know ours is not a grand passion, not yet, at any rate, but I hope you feel safe with me, cared for." Nellie's throat tightened. "I do," she said. "Edmund, you are a good man, and you are a remarkable woman," he said warmly. "I count myself fortunate every day." The words were lovely. They should have made her happy. Instead, they made her want to weep, because Edmund deserved better than this, better than a bride whose thoughts strayed constantly to his best friend, better than a woman who could barely look at him without feeling crushing guilt. As they rode back toward the house, Nellie saw Vincent standing on the terrace watching their approach. Even from a distance, she felt the weight of his gaze. This could not continue. Something had to give. That afternoon, while most of the house party guests were occupied with various pursuits, cards, reading, napping, Nellie slipped away to the rose garden. She needed air, needed space, needed to think. She had not been there 5 minutes when Vincent appeared. He did not approach immediately. He stood at the garden gate, his dark eyes finding hers across the riot of blooming roses. "We should not be alone," Nellie said, though she made no move to leave. "I know," Vincent said quietly, stepping into the garden, "but I must speak with you." "There is nothing to say," Nellie said desperately. "Last night was a mistake, we both know it." "A mistake?" Vincent's voice was low, rough. "Is that truly what you believe?" "What else can it be?" Nellie demanded, her composure finally cracking. "I am engaged to your dearest friend. You and I, there is no possibility of— Vincent, we cannot do this." "Then I will speak to Edmund," Vincent said abruptly. Nelly's blood ran cold. "What?" "I will tell him the truth," Vincent said, moving closer. "I will confess what I feel for you, and I will withdraw from his life so that there is no conflict of—" "No," Nelly said sharply. "Absolutely not. Vincent, you cannot tell him. It would destroy him. Not just the betrayal, but losing you. You are closer than a brother to him. I will not be responsible for that." "Then what?" Vincent asked, and there was such anguish in his voice that Nelly's heart broke. "What do you propose we do, Nelly? You marry Edmund in July and I, what, stand there and watch? Smile and offer congratulations? Attend dinners at your home for the rest of our lives and pretend I do not love you?" "I do not know," Nelly cried. "But you cannot tell Edmund. Promise me, Vincent, promise me you will say nothing." Vincent stared at her for a long moment, his jaw tight. "Very well," he said finally. "I will say nothing. But Nelly, this cannot end well." "You know that, do you not?" "I know," she whispered. "Then why are we doing this?" Vincent asked. "Why are we destroying ourselves for the sake of propriety?" "Because some things matter more than our happiness," Nelly said, though the words tasted like poison. "Edmund's trust, our family's honor, the promises that have been made. We do not have the luxury of selfishness, Vincent. Not people like us." "People like us," Vincent repeated bitterly. "You mean people with titles and responsibilities and reputations to uphold? To the devil with all of it, Nelly. What good is honor if it means living a lie?" "I do not know," Nelly said again, and now she was crying openly. "But I cannot. I will not be the woman who destroys two good men for her own desires. I will not." Vincent closed his eyes, his whole body rigid with frustration and pain. When he opened them again, they were bleak. "Then this is goodbye," he said quietly. "Because I cannot stay, Nelly. I cannot be near you and not have you. I am not strong enough." "Where will you go?" Nelly asked, her voice breaking. "Abroad, perhaps, or to my Scottish estates, somewhere far enough that I need not torture myself with your proximity." He took a step closer, and his hand lifted as though to touch her face, then dropped. "But know this, Nelly Fenring, I will love you until the day I die. And if you ever change your mind, if you ever find that you cannot go through with this marriage, you need only send word, and I will come for you. No matter where I am, no matter what stands between us, I will come. Vincent, that is my vow to you," he said. "The only promise I can make." Then, before Nelly could respond, he turned and strode from the garden, leaving her standing alone among the roses, her heart in pieces. The house party concluded the following day. Vincent departed early, citing urgent business in London. Edmund was disappointed but understanding, clasping his friend's hand warmly and making him promise to return for the wedding. Vincent had smiled, a cold, empty thing, and agreed. Nelly watched him ride away from an upper window, her hand pressed to the glass, and knew with absolute certainty that she had just made the worst decision of her life. The weeks that followed were a special kind of hell. The wedding preparations accelerated. Fittings for Nelly's gown, meetings with the vicar, endless discussions about flowers and music and seating arrangements. Nelly moved through it all like an automaton, smiling when expected, agreeing to every suggestion, feeling nothing. Edmund was attentive and sweet, clearly working to deepen their connection before the wedding. He brought her small gifts, a volume of poetry he thought she might enjoy, a pretty silk shawl, a posy of her favorite flowers. He talked to her about estate management, asking her opinions and truly listening to her answers. He was, in every way, exactly the sort of husband any sensible woman would treasure. And Nelly felt dead inside. Hazel watched her with growing concern, but said nothing. What was there to say? The choice had been made, the path was set. Vincent did not return to London. Word reached Edmund through mutual friends that the Duke had gone to his estates in Northumberland and showed no signs of returning soon. "I confess I am rather hurt," Edmund admitted to Nelly one afternoon. "Vincent and I have never gone so long without corresponding. I have written him twice with no reply. I hope I have not offended him somehow." Nelly's guilt was a living thing, gnawing at her constantly. "Perhaps he is simply occupied with estate matters," she suggested weakly. "Perhaps," Edmund said, but he looked troubled. It was mid-June, 3 weeks before the wedding, when everything changed. Nelly had gone with Hazel to the modiste for a final fitting of her wedding gown. It was a masterpiece of ivory silk and Belgian lace, elegant and traditional and everything a bride should wear. Looking at herself in the glass, dressed in wedding finery, Nellie felt absolutely nothing. It was as though she were looking at a stranger. "It is beautiful," Hazel said quietly. "You look like a queen." "I look like a corpse," Nellie said flatly. The modiste, startled, quickly excused herself to fetch some pins. When they were alone, Hazel turned to Nellie with unusual severity. "You cannot do this," she said. "I must," Nellie said. "The invitations have been sent." "The church is—" "That is not what I meant," Hazel interrupted. "You cannot marry Lord Edmund while you are in love with another man. It is not fair to him. It is not fair to you. And it will make everyone involved miserable. I will learn to be happy." "No, you will not," Hazel said firmly. "Miss Nellie, I have known you since you were 19 years old. I have never seen you truly happy, truly alive, until the Duke of Ravenmore looked at you. And I will not stand by and watch you bury that for the sake of avoiding scandal." "It is not just scandal," Nellie said desperately. "It is—" "I know," Hazel said. "It is honor and duty, and all the things we are taught matter more than our own hearts. But what if we are wrong? What if happiness matters too?" Nellie stared at her companion, her mind reeling. "What are you saying?" she whispered. "I am saying," Hazel said carefully, "that if you truly cannot live without the Duke, then you must act, before it is too late." "And Edmund?" "Lord Edmund is a good man," Hazel said, "and good men deserve honest wives. Not women who are merely performing the role of happy spouse while their hearts belong elsewhere. If you truly love his grace, then Edmund deserves to know, before he marries you." The words settled over Nellie like a mantle, heavy, inescapable, true. That night she lay awake until dawn, staring at her ceiling, turning Hazel's words over and over in her mind. By morning she had made her decision. She would go to Edmund. She would tell him the truth, all of it. And she would give him the choice of whether to end their betrothal. It was terrifying. It might destroy everything. But Hazel was right. Edmund deserved honesty. And so did Vincent. And so, perhaps, did she. The next afternoon, Nellie asked Edmund to meet her in the garden at Berkeley Square. She wore a simple day dress of pale blue muslin, and her hands shook as she waited for him beneath the oak tree where he had first proposed. When Edmund arrived, smiling and unsuspecting, Nellie felt her resolve waver. Then she thought of Vincent's face in the library, of the raw love and pain in his eyes, and she found her courage. "Edmund," she said quietly, "we must talk." "Of course," he said, settling onto the bench beside her. "What troubles you, my dear?" Nellie took a deep breath. "I must tell you something, and I pray you will forgive me for not speaking sooner." Edmund's smile faded slightly. "You sound very serious." "I am," Nellie said. "Edmund, you have been nothing but kind to me. You have treated me with respect and affection, and I am deeply grateful for that. But I cannot marry you." Edmund went very still. "What?" "I am so sorry," Nellie said, her voice shaking. "But it would not be fair to either of us to enter into marriage when I—" She faltered, then forced herself to continue. "When I have feelings for someone else." The color drained from Edmund's face. "Someone else," he repeated. "But who— when did you—" He stopped abruptly, his eyes widening with terrible comprehension. "Vincent," he said flatly. Nellie could not lie. Not now. "Yes," she whispered. Edmund stood abruptly, his hands clenching into fists. For a long moment he said nothing, and Nellie braced herself for his fury. But when he finally spoke, his voice was not angry. It was hollow. "How long?" "Since we met," Nellie admitted. "I tried to fight it, Edmund. I swear to you I tried. But I cannot go through with our marriage knowing that my heart belongs to someone else. You deserve better than that." "Does he?" Edmund's voice cracked. "Does Vincent return your feelings?" "Yes," Nellie said quietly. Edmund made a sound like he had been punched. He turned away from her, his shoulders rigid. "My best friend," he said, almost to himself. "The man I trusted more than anyone in the world." "He did not betray you," Nellie said urgently. "Edmund, neither of us wanted this. We both tried to do what was right, but some things, some feelings cannot be controlled." "Cannot be controlled," Edmund repeated bitterly. He spun back to face her, and for the first time she saw real anger in his eyes. "You speak of feelings as though they absolve you of responsibility, but you made a choice, Nellie. You both did. Every moment you spent together, every look, every—" He broke off, his jaw working. "Were you unfaithful to me?" "We kissed," Nellie admitted, her cheeks burning with shame. "Once at your family's estate. Nothing more than that, I swear it." "Nothing more," Edmund said, and laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "How noble of you both." "I am sorry," Nellie said, tears streaming down her face. "Edmund, I am so sorry. I never meant to hurt you." "And yet here we are," Edmund said. He closed his eyes, his whole body trembling with the effort of controlling his emotions. When he opened them again, they were haunted. "Did you ever love me, even a little?" "I cared for you," Nellie said. "I still do, but not in the way I should have. Not in the way you deserved." Edmund nodded slowly, as though she had confirmed something he had suspected. "I see. What will you do?" Nellie asked. "What will I do?" Edmund echoed. "I will end our betrothal, obviously. The scandal will be considerable, but I suppose that cannot be helped." He looked at her, and his expression was devastatingly sad. "I hope you and Vincent will be very happy together. Truly I do, because if you have destroyed our friendship and your reputation for nothing more than infatuation, it will have been a tragic waste." "It is not infatuation," Nellie said quietly. "I love him, Edmund, with everything I am." "Then I suppose that must be enough," Edmund said. He took a step back, creating distance between them. "Goodbye, Miss Fenring. I hope we need not see each other again." And with that he turned and walked away, leaving Nellie alone in the garden, her heart breaking for the good man she had wounded and the impossible love she had chosen. The scandal broke like a summer storm, sudden, violent, and impossible to ignore. Within 2 days of Edmund formally ending the betrothal, all of London society knew. The details were murky. Some said Miss Fenring had been caught in a compromising position with another man. Others whispered that she had simply changed her mind, and poor Lord Hartley was heartbroken. A few claimed there had been financial difficulties that made the match untenable, but the core truth was inescapable. The season's perfect lady had broken her engagement mere weeks before the wedding, and the resulting scandal was delicious. The Marquess of Fenring was apoplectic. "What were you thinking?" he roared at Nellie in his study, his face purple with rage. "Do you understand what you have done? The shame you have brought upon this family?" "I could not marry him, father," Nellie said quietly. She was too exhausted for tears, too hollowed out for fear. "It would have been wrong." "Wrong?" her father spat. "I will tell you what is wrong. Destroying an advantageous match because of some foolish notion of romantic love. You are 23, Nellie, not 17. You should know better." "Perhaps I should," Nellie agreed, "but I could not live a lie." Her father stared at her as though she had grown a second head. "You will be ruined," he said finally. "No respectable man will have you now. You will end up a spinster dependent on your family's charity for the rest of your life." "Then so be it," Nellie said. And she meant it. Because whatever happened now, whatever consequences she faced, at least she would face them honestly. At least she would not spend her life wondering what might have been if she had chosen differently. Her father had dismissed her with disgust, declaring that she would retire to the country until the scandal died down. "You will not show your face in London again this season," he had decreed. "Perhaps by next year people will have found other amusements to occupy their gossip." Nellie had agreed without protest. London held nothing for her now anyway. Edmund would not see her, and Vincent was hundreds of miles away in Northumberland, unaware of what she had done. She had written to him, of course, a letter sent express the day after she had ended the betrothal, explaining everything. But there had been no reply. Perhaps he had not received it yet. Or perhaps, and this thought made her chest tight with fear, perhaps he had changed his mind. Perhaps the reality of scandal and complication had made him reconsider his declaration in the library. Perhaps she had destroyed everything for nothing. It was Hazel who saved her from complete despair. "Stop that," she said firmly, 2 days after the scandal broke. They were in Nellie's chamber, packing for the removal to her father's estate in Hertfordshire. "Stop assuming the worst." "What else am I to assume?" Nellie asked dully. "I have heard nothing from Vincent. Not a word." "Northumberland is far," Hazel pointed out, "and you only sent the letter 3 days ago. Give him time." "And if he does not come?" Nellie whispered. Hazel sat beside her on the bed, taking her hand. "Then you will survive," she said gently. You will go to Hertfordshire, you will hold your head high, and you will build a life. It may not be the life you imagined, but it will be yours, and that is worth something." Nellie wanted to believe her. But in her heart, she knew the truth. If Vincent did not come for her, she would never recover. She would be forever broken, forever marked by the love she had chosen and lost. They departed for Hertfordshire on a grey morning, rain misting the windows of the carriage. Nellie sat beside Hazel, watching London recede behind them, and felt as though she were leaving her heart behind. The countryside passed in a blur. Green fields, stone walls, sheep grazing beneath stormy skies. The world continued, indifferent to her private tragedy. They were perhaps 20 miles from London when the carriage suddenly lurched to a stop. "What on earth?" the Marquis began, leaning out the window to shout at the driver. But before he could speak, the carriage door was wrenched open, and there, rain-soaked and wild-eyed and more beautiful than anything Nellie had ever seen, was Vincent Montague. "Nellie," he said, his voice rough and urgent. "Thank God. I thought I had missed you." Nellie's heart stopped, then restarted at double speed. "Vincent," she whispered, unable to believe he was real. "What is the meaning of this?" the Marquis sputtered. "Your Grace, I must insist—" "Forgive me, Lord Fenring," Vincent said, though he never took his eyes from Nellie's face. "But I must speak with your daughter privately." "Absolutely not," the Marquis said. "She has caused scandal enough." "Father," Nellie interrupted quietly, "please." Something in her voice, or perhaps in her face, made the Marquis hesitate. He looked between his daughter and the Duke, and his expression grew calculating. 10 minutes, he said finally, "and the companion stays." Vincent nodded sharply. He reached into the carriage and took Nellie's hand, helping her down into the rain. Hazel followed, positioning herself a tactful distance away, close enough to preserve propriety, far enough to grant them privacy. "I received your letter," Vincent said as soon as they were alone. Well, as alone as they could be with Hazel, the coachman, and the Marquis all watching. "I left Northumberland the moment I read it. I have been riding for 2 days straight." "You came," Nellie said, and her voice broke on the words. "Of course I came," Vincent said fiercely. "Nellie, did you truly think I would not? You ended your betrothal. You chose—" He stopped, seeming to struggle for words. "You chose me. Do you understand what that means, what you have sacrificed?" "Yes," Nellie said, "and I would do it again." Vincent made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "You impossible, maddening, perfect woman," he said. Then, apparently no longer caring who watched, he pulled her into his arms and kissed her. It was nothing like their first kiss in the library. That had been desperate, stolen, weighted with impossibility. This kiss was different. It was a promise, a claim, a beginning. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said, "not because of scandal or obligation or anything else. Marry me because I love you more than I have ever loved anything in my life. Marry me because the thought of living without you is unbearable. Marry me because you are my home, Nellie, and I am yours." Tears streamed down Nellie's face, mixing with the rain. "Yes," she said. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." Behind them, Hazel let out a small, delighted laugh. Even the coachman was grinning. The Marquess, however, looked considerably less pleased. "Your Grace," he said stiffly, "while I appreciate your enthusiasm, there are practical matters to consider. My daughter's reputation has been compromised. The scandal will be nothing compared to the scandal if I, a duke, marry her," Vincent finished calmly. "I am aware, Lord Fenring, and I do not care. Let them talk. Let them gossip. Nellie will be a duchess, and anyone who dares to slight her will answer to me." The Marquis blinked, clearly taken aback by the steel in Vincent's voice. Then, slowly, a calculating smile spread across his face. "A duchess," he repeated. "Yes, yes. That would rather mitigate the damage, would it not? Very well, Your Grace. You have my blessing, though I dare say you would have proceeded regardless." "I would have," Vincent agreed without apology. He turned back to Nellie, his dark eyes blazing with triumph and joy. "Come, I have a carriage waiting. We leave for Scotland tonight." "Scotland?" Nellie asked, dazed. "Gretna Green," Vincent said. unless you wish to wait for banns and a proper wedding, though I confess I would rather marry you immediately before anything else can go wrong." Nellie thought of elaborate ceremonies and guest lists and months of waiting. Then she looked at Vincent, at his rain-soaked hair and fierce eyes and the way he held her as though she were infinitely precious, and knew her answer. "Scotland," she said firmly. "Tonight." They were married 3 days later in a small church just across the Scottish border. Hazel stood as witness, along with a startled vicar who clearly thought he was marrying runaways but was too well compensated to ask questions. Nellie wore a simple dress of cream muslin, hastily purchased from a village shop. She had no flowers, no music, no trailing veil of Belgian lace. But when Vincent took her hand and pledged himself to her before God and the vicar, Nellie felt more beautiful than she ever had in all her London finery. "I, Vincent Montague, take thee, Nellie Fenring, to be my wedded wife," he said, his voice steady and sure. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death us do part." And Nellie, tears streaming down her face, repeated the vows back to him with all her heart. When the vicar pronounced them man and wife, Vincent kissed her with such tender passion that even the dour Scottish clergyman smiled. They spent their wedding night at an inn in a village whose name Nellie immediately forgot. It was nothing like the elaborate wedding night she had once imagined. No grand estate, no servants, no trousseau of fine nightgowns. Just a small, clean room with a fire burning in the grate, and Vincent, her husband, looking at her as though she were the most precious thing in the world. "Are you frightened?" he asked quietly, as he helped her with the buttons of her dress. The inn had no lady's maid, and Hazel had tactfully retired to her own chamber. "No," Nellie said truthfully. "I have never been less frightened in my life." And it was true. For the first time since she could remember, Nellie felt entirely, perfectly safe. She was Vincent's wife. She was free to love him without shame or secrecy. Whatever happened now, whatever scandal or gossip awaited them, they would face it together. When Vincent finally lowered her onto the bed, his hands gentle but sure, Nellie pulled him down to her with a smile. "I love you," she whispered against his mouth. "And I love you," Vincent replied. "Forever, Nellie, I promise you that." And as the fire burned low and the Scottish night settled around them, Nellie knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice. Some loves were worth any sacrifice, worth any scandal, worth everything. They returned to London 6 weeks later, and the scandal that greeted them was everything Nellie had feared, and somehow less terrible than she had imagined. Yes, the gossips were vicious. Yes, certain doors were closed to them, but Vincent was a duke, and dukes could weather scandal in ways lesser mortals could not. More importantly, Vincent made it clear, through subtle social maneuvering and, when necessary, outright intimidation, that anyone who slighted his duchess would find themselves permanently on the wrong side of one of England's most powerful men. Gradually, slowly, society adjusted. Invitations began arriving again. Doors reopened. And if some of the highest sticklers continued to turn up their noses, Vincent and Nellie found they did not care overmuch. They had each other. That was enough. The one shadow that remained was Edmund. Vincent had written to him, a long, anguished letter explaining everything, apologizing for the betrayal, begging for understanding if not forgiveness. Edmund's reply had been brief. "I wish you both well, but I will not maintain our friendship. What you did was unforgivable. Please do not write to me again." The loss of his oldest friend devastated Vincent in ways the scandal never could. For weeks after receiving Edmund's letter, he was withdrawn and melancholy, blaming himself for the ruin of a brotherhood that had meant everything to him. "He will forgive you in time," Nellie told him one night as they lay together in their London townhouse. "Wounds this deep require time to heal." "Perhaps," Vincent said, but he sounded unconvinced. Nellie held him tighter, wishing she could ease his pain but knowing some burdens had to be carried. 2 years passed. 2 years of marriage that were, despite the rocky beginning, remarkably happy. Vincent and Nellie settled into their life together with surprising ease. They divided their time between London, Vincent's main estate in Kent, and his smaller properties in Yorkshire and Scotland. They travelled to Paris one autumn, to Venice the next spring. They read together, rode together, learned each other's rhythms and preferences and secret fears. And if society never quite forgot the scandal of their beginning, they at least stopped discussing it at every opportunity. Nellie became pregnant in their second year of marriage, and when she delivered a healthy son with Vincent's dark hair and her grey eyes, their joy was complete. "We shall name him William," Vincent said, cradling the infant with surprising gentleness for such a large man. "After my father, William Montague," Nellie said softly, running a finger over the baby's tiny hand. "It suits him." As she watched her husband with their son, Nellie felt a contentment so profound it was almost painful. This was what she had chosen. This love, this life, this family, and it had been worth every moment of scandal and suffering. It was late autumn of their third year of marriage when the letter arrived. Vincent had been in his study reviewing estate accounts when the butler brought in the post. Most of it was routine, invitations, business correspondence, bills, but one letter made him freeze. The handwriting was achingly familiar. With shaking hands, Vincent broke the seal and read, "Vincent, I write this with considerable trepidation as I am uncertain of my welcome. But recent events have given me cause to reflect, and I find I can no longer maintain my silence. I have been living in Hampshire since our falling out, managing my father's estates. He suffered an apoplexy last year and has since been unable to fulfill his duties. The isolation has given me much time to think. I was angry with you for so long, hurt beyond measure by what I perceived as your betrayal, but time has a way of softening even the sharpest wounds, and I have come to realize several truths. First, you did not pursue Nellie with malicious intent. I saw the two of you together often enough to recognize the connection between you, even if I was too blind at the time to understand its significance. What you felt for each other was genuine, rare even, the sort of love that most people never experience. Second, Nellie was honest with me before our marriage. She ended our betrothal rather than binding herself to me while in love with you. That took courage, and I've come to respect it, even if it caused me pain. Third, and perhaps most importantly, I have met someone. Her name is Miss Catherine Ashworth. She is the daughter of a neighboring squire. Not a brilliant match by society's standards, but a woman of genuine warmth and intelligence. We have been courting for 6 months, and I find myself happy, truly happy in a way I never was during my betrothal to Nellie. I loved Nellie, or thought I did, but it was a pale, tepid thing compared to what I feel for Catherine. And that has made me realize perhaps losing Nellie was not the tragedy I believed it to be. Perhaps it freed us both to find the loves we were meant to have. I am to marry Catherine this spring, and I find I would very much like my oldest friend to be there. I do not expect an immediate reconciliation. Too much has passed between us for that. But if you are willing, if you can forgive my coldness these past years, I should like to try to rebuild our friendship. It will not be what it was, but perhaps it can be something new, something honest. I hope you and Nellie are well. I hear you have a son. Congratulations. If you wish to write back, I shall be at Ashton Manor through the winter. Your friend, if you will still have me." Edmund Vincent read the letter 3 times, his throat tight with emotion. Then he rose from his desk and went in search of his wife. He found her in the nursery, rocking their son to sleep. She looked up when he entered, and her smile faded when she saw his face. "What is it?" she asked quietly. Wordlessly, Vincent handed her the letter. Nellie read it slowly, her expression shifting from shock to something that looked almost like hope. When she finished, she looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "He is happy," she said softly. "He has found someone who makes him happy." "Yes," Vincent said, his own voice rough with emotion, "and he is willing to forgive. Nellie, he wants to be friends again." "Do you want that?" Nellie asked carefully. "After everything?" Vincent thought about it, truly thought about it. 3 years ago, he would have given anything to have Edmund's friendship back. But now, with the perspective of time and the security of his marriage to Nellie, he could see the situation more clearly. "I do," he said finally. "Not because I need his forgiveness to be happy. I have you and William, and that is enough. But because Edmund was my brother in everything but blood. And if he is willing to try again, then yes, I want that." Nellie rose, still cradling their sleeping son, and crossed to Vincent. She kissed him gently. "Then write to him," she said. "Tell him yes. Tell him we shall both attend his wedding. Tell him—" She paused, her eyes bright with tears. "Tell him I am glad he found his Catherine, that I wish them every happiness." Vincent pulled her close, carefully so as not to wake the baby, and held them both. "We are fortunate," he murmured. "All of us. It was a terrible mess, but we all found our way through." "Yes," Nellie agreed. "We did." The following spring, Vincent and Nellie travelled to Hampshire for Edmund's wedding to Miss Catherine Ashworth. It was a smaller affair than Edmund's wedding to Nellie would have been. No grand London ceremony, just a simple country wedding with family and close friends. But it was beautiful in its intimacy. And when Nellie saw Edmund at the altar, watching Catherine walk toward him with such naked adoration on his face, she knew with absolute certainty that this was right. This was the woman Edmund was meant to marry. Not Nellie, never Nellie. Catherine, with her warm brown eyes and gentle smile, and the way she looked at Edmund as though he had hung the stars. After the ceremony, there was a wedding breakfast at Ashton Manor. Vincent and Edmund spoke for the first time in 3 years, and though there was initial awkwardness, it gradually eased into something that felt almost like their old friendship. "Your son is the image of you," Edmund said, watching as Nellie bounced William on her hip across the room. "Poor child," Vincent said dryly, and Edmund laughed, genuine, unforced. "You are happy," Edmund observed. "Both of you." "We are," Vincent confirmed. Then, hesitantly, "And you with Catherine?" Edmund's face softened. "More than I ever imagined possible," he admitted. "She is, Vincent, she is extraordinary. Not in the way society measures such things, but in ways that matter. She laughs at my terrible jokes. She shares my love of horses. She wants a dozen children and a life in the country, not London society. She is perfect for me." "Then I am glad," Vincent said sincerely. "And Edmund, I am sorry for everything, for the pain I caused you." Edmund was quiet for a moment, then he said, "I'm sorry too, I was rigid in my anger, unwilling to see that you and Nellie, that what you had was real. I think I was more hurt by losing you than by losing her, if I am honest, and that pride made me cruel." "We were all navigating impossible circumstances," Vincent said, "but we survived. And perhaps we are all better for it now." "Perhaps," Edmund agreed. Later, as the afternoon waned and guests began departing, Catherine approached Nellie with shy warmth. "Your Grace," she said, "I wanted to thank you." "Thank me?" Nellie asked, surprised. "For setting Edmund free," Catherine said simply. "I know it must have been difficult, breaking your betrothal, facing the scandal. But if you had married him out of duty, I should never have met him. And he is—" She blushed prettily. "He is everything to me." Nellie felt her throat tighten with emotion. "He is a good man," she said softly. "I always knew that. I simply was not the right woman for him. But you, I can see that you are." Catherine smiled and impulsively took Nellie's hand. "I hope we can be friends," she said. "I know the circumstances are unusual, but I should like that very much," Nellie said truthfully. And watching Catherine return to Edmund's side, seeing the way they looked at each other with such uncomplicated joy, Nellie felt the last remnant of guilt finally lift from her shoulders. Everyone had found their place. Everyone was happy. And though the path had been twisted and painful, they had all arrived exactly where they were meant to be. 5 years later, the two couples were fast friends. Edmund and Catherine had 4 children, with a 5th on the way, and their country estate rang with laughter and chaos. Vincent and Nellie had added 2 daughters to their family, and their lives were full of the noise and joy of children. They visited each other frequently, the Hartleys spending summers at the Montagues' Kent estate, the Montagues joining the Hartleys for winter house parties in Hampshire. One evening during one such visit, the adults sat together after the children had been put to bed. A fire crackled in the drawing room, and they drank wine and talked of inconsequential things: estate management, the children's educations, the latest scandal in London. At one point Edmund raised his glass. "A toast," he said, "to unlikely happiness." "To unlikely happiness?" they all echoed, clinking glasses. Nellie caught Vincent's eye across the room, and he smiled at her, that rare, genuine smile he reserved only for her. And in that moment, Nellie thought of the girl she had been 5 years ago, the season's perfect lady, trapped in an engagement that would have made her respectable and miserable. That girl was gone. In her place was a woman who had chosen love over duty, scandal over security, truth over convenience. A woman who had fought for her happiness and won. "What are you thinking?" Vincent murmured later that night as they prepared for bed in the guest chamber. "That I am fortunate," Nellie said simply. "That we all are." Vincent pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "The most fortunate of men," he agreed, "because I have you." And as they drifted off to sleep in each other's arms, with their children sleeping peacefully down the hall and dear friends just rooms away, Nellie knew one final truth. Some loves were worth fighting for, worth sacrificing for, worth everything, and she had found hers. The end. Dear listener, tonight, as this story ends, I want to share something with you that perhaps no one has said in quite this way before. You know what strikes me most about Nellie's journey? It wasn't that she found love. It was that she found the courage to disappoint people. Think about that for a moment. How much of your life have you spent trying not to disappoint anyone? Your parents, your children, your partner, your friends, even strangers whose opinions shouldn't matter but somehow do. We're taught from childhood that being good means making others happy, that being loving means sacrificing our truth, that being responsible means carrying everyone else's expectations on our shoulders until we can barely stand. But here's what no one tells you. The weight you're carrying wasn't meant to crush you, and putting it down isn't cruelty, it's wisdom. Nellie stood in that garden and broke a good man's heart. She knew it would cause scandal. She knew her father would rage. She knew society would whisper. And she did it anyway, not because she was selfish, but because she finally understood something profound. A life lived for everyone else's comfort is not a life at all. It's a performance. And performances always end in exhaustion. Now, I'm not suggesting you blow up your life tomorrow morning, but I am asking you this. When was the last time you did something simply because it made you feel alive? Not accomplished, not validated, not praised, but genuinely, vibrantly alive? When was the last time you laughed so hard you forgot to worry? Felt so much joy you forgot to be tired? Experienced such peace that you forgot, even for a moment, all the ways you think you're failing? Here's a truth that might surprise you. You are still allowed to feel things deeply. Society may try to convince you that passion is for the young, that intensity should mellow with age, that your job now is simply to be comfortable and quiet and not make waves. But your heart didn't get that memo, did it? Your heart still leaps at beauty, still aches with longing, still dreams of things you've never admitted aloud. And that's not foolishness or immaturity. That's proof you're still magnificently, courageously alive. You see, Edmund needed Nellie to tell the truth, not because the truth set him free in some poetic way, but because her honesty gave him permission to want more too. He thought he should be content with a pleasant, respectable marriage. He thought passion was optional, even naive. But when Nellie chose the terrifying path of authenticity, she inadvertently showed Edmund that he was also allowed to wait for something real. And he found Catherine, not perfect Catherine, not society-approved Catherine, but his Catherine, the woman who made him laugh, who wanted the life he wanted, who loved him not for his title but for his terrible jokes and his gentle heart. What if your honesty could do that for someone else? What if your courage to choose differently could give another person permission to do the same? Tonight, before you sleep, I want you to try something. Place your hand on your chest and feel your heartbeat. That steady, faithful rhythm that has kept you alive through every single thing life has thrown at you. Every loss, every disappointment, every moment you thought you couldn't survive, and yet here you are, still beating, still breathing, still remarkably stubbornly here. That heart of yours, it's not fragile, it's not broken beyond repair, it's not too old or too tired or too scarred to deserve tenderness. Your heart is a warrior that has fought battles no one else can see, and it deserves to rest now in softness, not in resignation. So as you close your eyes tonight, release this burden. You do not have to be everyone's answer. You do not have to fix everything. You do not have to earn your right to rest through endless usefulness. You can simply be imperfect, uncertain, still figuring things out, still wanting things, still hoping.